Hi again, Year 6. This time I'm going to be talking you through how to find fractions and percentages of an amount. Okay, so I've started off here with some of the easy fractions. Now, a half, a quarter and a tenth. To find a half of anything, you're just dividing it by 2. Okay, dividing by 2. To find a quarter of anything, we can either divide it by 4, or we know that if you think about a quarter is halving it and then halving it again. So you could halve it and halve it again. And then to find a tenth, you're just dividing it by 10. Okay, so really nice and easy. To find half of 64, I'd just half it, so that would be 32. To find half of 14, I'm dividing it by 2, so that would be 7. To find a quarter, I'm dividing it by 4, so 100 divided by 4 is 25, or if I wanted to half it and half it again, half of 100 is 50, and then half of 50 takes me to 25, and then a quarter of 24, I can either half it and half it again, so half of 24 is 12, and half of 12 is 6, or I know that 24 divided by 4 is 6, and then finding a tenth, I'm dividing by 10, so 240 divided by 10 is going to be 24, and 98 divided by 10 would be 9.8. Okay, and that shows you that it is possible to have a number with a decimal for your answers for this. Okay, so don't be afraid of answers that end up looking like that, because if you think about dividing 98 by 10, I'm moving each digit one place to the right. Okay, so moving on to some slightly harder questions. Okay, so here I've got 3/5 of 65. Okay, so what I like to do is I like to draw myself a picture to help me represent that amount. Okay, so here I've got 65, whatever they are, whether it's pounds or bananas or books, 65, okay? That's the whole amount is worth 65. But I don't need the whole amount, I need 3/5 of it. So that whole amount has been split into 5 equal sections, okay? Because if you think about it, to make a whole, you'd have 5/5. Okay, so that denominator tells me how many equal sections it's been split into. So if I start by thinking about that, 65 divided by 5, so that I know what each one section is worth. So if I do 65 divided by 5, now I could do my bus stop method, but actually that I know that 12 lots of 5 is 60. So it must be 13 lots of 5 that would be 65. So now each of these sections is worth 13. Okay, and that's my whole amount. But I don't want my whole amount. I only want 3 of these fifths. Okay, so now to finish it off, I'm going to do 13 times by 3. Now I know 10 times 3 is 30, and I know 3 times 3 is 9. So my answer would be 39. Okay, so what you'll see that I've done there is I've taken the number that I started with, 65, I've divided it by the denominator, and then my answer, 13, I have multiplied by the numerator to get my answer. So the answer is 39. Now, hopefully that picture helps you to understand why we use the rhyme divide by the bottom times by the top. Okay, divide by the bottom times by the top. And you can probably picture me doing my silly little dance while I'm saying that. Divide by the bottom times by the top. So for this next question, 3/4 of 52, I might want to draw myself a little diagram to help, but actually I know that I can just do 52 divide by the bottom, so divided by 4. So I'm going to do myself a little bus stop method just to make sure that I get this one correct. How many 4s go into 5? 1, remainder 1. How many 4s go into 12? 3. So again, I've got that answer, 13. Okay, and then I'm going to do that answer, 13, times by the top. So actually, cleverly, without even realising it, I've ended up with the same answer twice. Okay. So we'll just do this. If you have a go at this one now, think about the question. So you're going to start with 88. That's your whole number that you're starting with. You're going to divide it by the bottom and then times your answer by the top. So it's going to be 88 divided by 8 equals something. And then you're going to do that something times by the top, 7. And that will give you your answer. Okay, so have a go at that now. Okay, so I'm going to move on to another example of a way you might be asked to find a fraction of a number. So here I've been asked to shade 1/3 of this shape. Okay, now then, to shade 1/3 of it, I can see that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pieces. So 1/3 means 1 out of 3, but my shape is actually out of 6. So I need to think, what have I done to turn 3 into 6? I've doubled it. So I'm going to have to double that top number. So I'm going to have to shade 2 out of this 6 to shade 1/3. 1, 2. Okay, and actually I can see that that is the same as 1/3 because here I've got 1 line, 2 lines. If I think about it being split into 1, 2, 3 sections like that, then I've shaded 1 section. Okay, another example of this is shading 3/5 of this shape. Now that means 3 out of 5, but I haven't got just 5 in this shape here. So I need to count how many squares I've got all together. I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 along and 1, 2, 3, 4 down. So that means I've got 20 squares all together. So it's not out of 5, it's out of 20. So how many 5s go into 20? I know that 4 5s make 20. So if I do the same to the top, it's going to be 12. So I now need to know that out of that 20, I need to shade 12 of them. So I'm going to think about 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm going to do 4s. I know that 3 4s make 20. So I'm just going to shade all of that column, all of that column, and all of that column. Okay. Okay, so we've looked at fractions of amounts. So now I'm going to think about percentages of an amount. Now, I've started you off here with some easy percentages. So we've got 50%, which we know is the same as 50 out of 100. And I know that 50 fits into 100 2 times. Okay, so that's the same as half. So to find 50% of something, I'm just dividing it by 2. Okay, 25% is the same as a quarter. And I know that to find a quarter of something, I divide it by 4. And just to remind me of that I know that that's right because 25 fits into 100 4 times. 10% of something, 10 goes into 100 10 times. So to find 10%, I'm dividing by 10. And 1%, 1 goes into 100 100 times. So to find 1% of something, I'm dividing the number by 100. Okay, so for example, to find 1% of 360, my answer would be 3.6. To find 1% of 1,800, my answer would be 18. Okay, so you're always, if you're finding 1%, you're just dividing that whole number by 100. And 1% is going to be a really important percentage to be able to find because that's going to help us with some more complicated questions. Okay, so for example here, 32% of 1,500. So what I'm going to do to really make this easy is I'm going to find 1% of 1,500. And I know that to find 1%, I divide by 100. So 1,500 divided by 100 is 15. Okay, now if that's 1%, I need 32%. Okay, so to get from 1 to 32%, I'm going to times it by 32. So I'm going to do 15 times by 32. Okay, and I'm going to work that out using my long multiplication method. Okay, so here I've done my long multiplication and I've worked out that my answer is going to be 480. Okay, and if we have a look at another example, 16% of 200. So I'm always going to start by finding 1% of 200. 1% means I've divided that number by 100, so that's a nice easy one. That's going to be 2. And then to find 16%, so that means 16 lots of that 1%, I'm going to do 2 times by 16, which I can do in my head, and double 16 will be 32. So my answer to this one is going to be 32. Okay, now just before you try some of those activities on your own, just remember that this word of can also be represented by a multiplication sign. So sometimes you might get a question that says 2/3 times by 63, which is exactly the same 2/3 of 63. So you can do exactly the same thing. 63 divided by the denominator, which would be 21. So if I do 63 divided by 3 is 21, and then that answer 21 times by the numerator would be 42, and that would give me my answer. So don't let that multiplication sign scare you, and it can be the same with percentage. So I could say 16% times 200 here, okay? And that means exactly the same as 16% of 200. So I would still do the same thing. I'd find 1% of 200, which is 2, and then I would do 2 times by 16, which is 32, to give me my answer. Okay, so don't be scared off by that multiplication sign. Okay, have a go at some of the activities and let us know how you get on.